Welcome to the Up Podcast, raw real talk on everything young parenting.
From self-care, co-parenting, and family planning, to balancing school, work, relationships, and goals.
Together, we're challenging society's assumptions and building a safe and supportive community for young parents.
One honest conversation at a time. So join us on the journey.
Hi guys, welcome back to another Yup episode. Today we have a very special guest in the education room who works directly with young parents. But before we allow them to introduce themselves, as always, it's Divine.
And I'm Brandy. And yes, like Divine said, we have a super special guest. We love her. Every time we talk to her, I feel like it's just like a warm hug and it feels like we're just talking, having a conversation. So today will be no different. So Nichole, if you can just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then also your journey being a former young parent, finishing school, and all of that.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you both so much for having me. I feel the same. Every time we communicate, it is very much like a warm hug. So that's a great way to describe it. And so, yes, for sure. So currently, my role is with a statewide program in Pennsylvania that serves expectant and parenting teens. And so we're focused mostly on the student focused. And so we're academic. We want to focus on getting our teen parents, our young parents through school, get them their diploma or HSE so they can focus then on post-secondary career or education. And of course, to hone in on really those life skills and parenting skills and healthy relationships and that kind of thing. But I've been doing this for 9 years and I really love it. Before that, I was a classroom teacher. So I taught English 7 to 12, both in Pennsylvania and Tennessee. And I really enjoy being a classroom teacher. One of the reasons I left the classroom, just to kind of keep this short and sweet, was because I really found it difficult to balance the content of the courses and what my students really needed at the core, right? So a lot of them had some really high needs. They really needed more focus on their mental health, or they needed something just to get them through the day that they weren't able to have outside of the classroom. So it was really hard for me to balance that. You know, as teachers, we kind of carry a lot of that on our backs and we take it home with us and we worry. And so instead of just having my 2 children at the time, I had hundreds, right? So it's tough, right? So, but before that, I have to say, I think a lot of times I kind of wonder, we think about our lives and we wonder how we got to where we are. And I think it really has come full circle for me because as you mentioned, I was 20 when I had my first child. And I have to say, if anyone would have told me that that would happen when I was back in high school, I would have said, you're absolutely mistaken. Like, I am not ready to have a child. And so I had all the big plans, like all the kids do, before you graduate, you're going to go on to school or whatever your big plans are. And so I went on to school. I went to Shippensburg University and I started out, strong. I was doing well, but, and again, not expected, but I ended up finding out I was pregnant. And I just knew that at the time I didn't have a choice but to continue. And I was very fortunate to have a support system, although they were very shocked by the news. And it was definitely not something they expected of me, of course, right? Like, what? So it was really shocking, but I have to say that at the end of the day, when I look back, all I can think about is the support and love that I felt from not only at the time, I had a really supportive partner, and of course his parents were supportive and mine. But we were on our own. We were at school. We didn't leave school. We kind of just partnered up and we got our classes scheduled separate and opposite of each other so that we could tote the baby around, and we carried him from class to class and switched him off in the little carrier. And we overcame that. We did have to get some additional help. It was that process of going through the WIC process and getting Medicaid to help cover our medical expenses. It was a challenge, but I think all of that led me to this point. It's interesting to me that I now am kind of providing this oversight and technical assistance and professional development to the staff that work so closely with our teen parents and students to get them on to where they need to be in life. And so it's really an inspirational position to be in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, your whole testimony alone and what you do is very close to my heart personally. Fun fact, I am an elect graduate. Um, so it is full circle. It's full circle here being with you and being able to also kind of have that position of inspiration to the other young parents because if it wasn't for elect, I don't know realistically how I would have finished high school, how I would have even imagined or dared going to college. So looking back, your program really was like a handheld stepping stone for me transitioning into continuing college and just seeing what that would look like, whether it was like parenting classes helping me, be the parent while also applying to college. It was very intimate and very close knit with my I had a few elect coordinators, but it truly is an inspiring program and I wish really other states had opportunities like such. But in your line of work, there is a bunch of barriers that young parents
Mhm.
in general face when, hoping to continue their education. What are some of those barriers that you notice that the young parents are facing when trying to continue their education?
Well, honestly, Divine, you're right. Like, I can't even, there's so many, and it really is not only are there these kind of overarching, like, general barriers for teen parents or young parents in general, but there's also individual barriers, right? Based on experience, based on life situation. And so each individual situation is so unique and dynamic. But I would say, first and foremost, we have structural barriers, right? Like things like affordable or accessible childcare. I mean, that's a huge one
Yes.
because if you think about everything else that goes along with that, if there's no childcare, so many other things kind of are not accessible. If you don't have childcare, you can't go to work. If you don't have childcare, you can't go to school. If you don't have so it just blocks these young people from being able to be successful. And so just navigating that whole childcare system is really tricky. So having somebody in your corner, like an elect program, case manager or any teen parent program or any mentor to assist you through that process is extremely crucial as a young parent. Other things like structurally would be class schedules. If you're in a brick and mortar school that doesn't have a lot of flexibility, having the ability to change or adjust your class schedule can be really difficult. So it really takes some flexibility. And if you're in a school building where you're lucky enough to have people who are willing to make those adjustments for you, then that's great. But if you're not, it's more about the creativity of somebody in your corner to kind of help advocate for you, teach you to advocate for yourself, or maybe even to find a different school setting for you to be in order to be successful, because there really are options. But if you don't know that, you need assistance trying to navigate that system. And then, of course, whether it be going on to post secondary or even just trying to save money for things you need, financial assistance or any kind of financial planning is also another structural barrier. So then we move on to things like social and internal barriers, right? Like socially, there's the stigma, there's the judgment from peers, or even just educators. And let's face it, society, right? I will say that I think over time, um, it's gotten better. I mean, if you think about it, there used to be a time where pregnant young people used to be separated from their school and go to a separate school and then come back when they had their baby, right?
Yeah.
So we've moved forward, but it's still not where it should be, right? So we still have more work to do. Um, the isolation that young parents feel can be really hard. And then, of course, just overall like self doubt, lack of confidence, and then, if you're managing so many responsibilities that even adults struggle, like adult people who have lived their lives and gone through all these things have trouble juggling. Um, so I think that as far as a call to action in my mind, when I think about this stuff, is really just encouraging our educational institutions to really address these barriers with kids. Because truthfully, our young parents are considered just like any other vulnerable youth population, to have some barriers that need to be removed for them to be successful. And you can't separate them from kids, for example, who are experiencing housing instability, or kids who are coming out of the foster care system, or whatever you might want to call, whatever area they're coming from. They all need assistance. And so we can't put our young parents into a separate category.
Yeah.
They all need our help. And so we need to do what's best for these parents and help them be successful.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I appreciate one, just kind of you giving us some background on your story because you get it. It's different to have people in the field who don't really understand what it's like to face those barriers, or to have to juggle your child between people, between classes, and having to consider, do I do this internship? Do I take this job? Can I go out with my friends for a drink or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Um, if you don't fully understand that, then it's sometimes hard, and it sometimes feels performative. And I think that there are a lot of programs that sometimes miss the mark a little bit for young parents, just because they don't have that lived experience, or they don't have young parents on their team, or they don't have whatever it is. And so I appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate the standpoint that you come from, because I also had my child in college at 20. I just turned 21, and I didn't necessarily have as much support on campus. But then when I graduated, I realized, oh, wait, there's this whole parenting center for student parents. But where was that information when I was pregnant?
Yeah.
And where were they all these years
Right.
when I was trying to navigate this? It's
Yeah.
great that I get to walk in their graduation, but I didn't know about any of these resources. And tag teaming with, I didn't necessarily have tag teaming with like the other parent, but I did have tag teaming with other moms. And so there were times I remember I would, on my off days, I would babysit this mom's newborn. I was thinking, this is great, but I'm exhausted. Like all day long, I'm
Yep.
babysitting, and then I go pick up my toddler, and then and so it's really hard to navigate those things. And then you have like the mental piece of it, right? And so my question to you is, how do you feel like the stigma that you talked about, how do you feel like young parents kind of internalize that, and the messages that they get about um what an ideal student is, or what an ideal parent is, or whatever that is? How do you feel like they internalize that, and how do you feel like that informs what they do next, continuing on with school, going back to school if it's high school, or going to college, or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting question because truthfully, what I was kind of thinking as you were talking is that, obviously there are so many misconceptions about being a teen parent, right? Or being a, parenting student at that. I think the internalization of these messages is huge. That's a big part of it. And so if they don't have somebody in their corner who's kind of filtering these messages to them, like sharing with them that, hey, you're hearing this, but this is the reality of it. Your reality doesn't have to be what you're hearing. And so the feelings of inadequacy, or the self-doubt that these young people feel when they hear these messages, it's real. It's real to them. They hear it, they feel it. But what they need truly is somebody to kind of, like I said, be that filter, be that somebody who can kind of express to them, show them the pathways that they can follow to truly get to success, that, how they define success, what they want. Because I think the message they get is so negative. But what a lot of the parenting students and teen parents that I've talked to, um, they say, like, having a child saved my life. Having a child made me more successful. Having a child helped me focus on my priorities, you know? And so I think, and not that I'm advocating, every teen go out and, that's not what I'm saying. But I think that what it does for so many of our young people that ultimately experience this is it sets their course, sometimes in a much healthier direction, if you want to know the truth. I think, so I hope that my goal, my dream, honestly, with all of the messages that they're getting, is that they kind of focus and shift to this path of resilience, and they gather all of this confidence that they know, eventually that they see it in themselves, right? That they know that they can handle it. But they can't get there unless they have somebody in their corner who can kind of express that and share that and, remind them, you know, how much potential they have inside of them. And I think that that's the biggest thing. Um, and I think more than anything, setting that example for their own children. If they're reminded that by having a child of their own, they now have a bigger purpose, right? Their purpose is now not only for themselves, but now to show their own children what it means to be resilient and to pursue your dreams and how important that is. And by doing that, in a sense, they're breaking that cycle. And really, we're talking about a cycle because, it doesn't have, that's not always the case, but the majority of the cases, we find are situations where they're just repeating a cycle within their family dynamic, maybe a cultural thing, maybe a long history background of family having children at an early age, and they need to redefine, in their mind and their heart, what they want to do next.
Yeah, I completely relate 100% of, and kind of what you said you experienced as well. As once you had your baby, you just simply did not have a choice. And I like the whole term of like being able to redefine, what this new life experience means for
Mhm.
you, because it truly did give me a new purpose. Like I had a bunch of different career paths, different career ideas, and things that I wanted to do. And, I still tune into those on like the side a little bit, but it was nowhere going the direction that I am now. And
Mhm.
again, I don't know how realistically I would have been successful or just in healthy life positions if I didn't have my daughter, because she did, give me this new sense of accountability where I'm not just doing it for me. I have someone looking up to me.
Mhm.
And although, I didn't have those real life examples from my own experience, like now I can be that, not only for her, for myself, for others who were in, my shoes. So I really appreciate that insight, because it truly isn't as stigmatized as it really needs to be, because we are just as vulnerable as youth population in whole, if not adding more into it. um so I really value that. And I think that also, incorporates how, our elect coordinators work with our unique cases, as far as if we're deciding to continue education, what will that look like? Because at first you just think it's not going to happen. Like if I didn't think I can do it then, how in the world can I do it now with a baby on
Yeah.
my head? So like, what would that look like? And for my personal experience, like I was like, oh, it's just not realistic, and then I just was going to do like a local community school. And then my educator informed me that there are schools that support parents. And I was just like, what? Like that's an opportunity for me. Like there's a school that will help me watch my child, help me live in a dorm setting. Like I was just like, that's a movie. Like that doesn't seem
Mhm.
real. And so with my coordinator, I only submitted one college application. That was it. And like my eggs were in that basket. And I was like,
Mm.
this is what's for me. Like, I believe in it. And like, she helped me get there. And here I am, like,
Yeah.
select graduate, college graduate of a college that supports young parents. So to be able to live in a real dorm building with other young mothers who was my support. And if I needed to take my daughter to class with me, although there was childcare literally in my dorm building, like if it were not for those resources, I would not be where I am today. I wouldn't be this success story for others. So I think it's important to kind of, maybe with you knowing the in and outs of education, what are some things that young parents should look for in finding, parent friendly education rooms, build platforms in general?
I think it's really interesting what you mentioned about the childcare. We talked about that being the absolute. I mean, between that, the only other one that I would say is even close in the running for a big barrier would be transportation.
Mhm.
But I think childcare is a huge one. And whether it be the high school experience or the college experience, I would say that the availability of childcare is the number one thing to look for. And I am completely aware of the fact that when a student is enrolled in a high school, for example, or they're pursuing their diploma or HSE, that childcare availability is much more challenging.
Mhm.
You don't always have the option of uprooting yourself and moving to another county or another district just because they might have childcare there. And I do get that. So I think just really being super intentional, super proactive, super, and really just advocate for yourself. Or at the very least, ensure that you have someone who will be willing to step in and do that for you. So whether it be finding that childcare to help you get through the situation, or if that's the college experience, sort of like you did, finding schools that are young parent friendly. At the very least. So maybe they don't have a childcare on campus, but they are aware, they are supportive of young parents, and they understand the needs that young parents have. So maybe they have clubs, or they have separate meeting spaces, or they have, resources available at the very least. So that's a big one. Obviously, flexible schedule options. So that's high school or college. I'm talking about hybrid or online courses,
Mhm.
things where they might let you have a little more flexibility in the morning and schedule your classes in the afternoon. There's just a lot of options I think that schools could explore if they want to provide our young parents with a little more flexibility. Financial aid, right? Childcare grants, things that you can do to assist our young parents with the needs they have that they may not be able to meet on their own. And of course, like I mentioned before, any kind of organizations or groups that you can implement that has these people, gathering together so that they can also come together and share their experience as a collective and be able to even help each other right through the process, because we all know that you know this teen parent or this young parent might be utilizing resources that another one doesn't understand or know about. So sharing experiences is a huge part of this, and that's one of the things I love about elect is that they do bring kids together to share their experiences. And when you get those people together, they often will learn things from each other, and they'll inspire each other as well. So I think that's a big piece of it. Um, and I think just when looking for a school or looking for any kind of educational entity, I think it's important that the young parent or expecting parent asks these questions. You have to ask questions, right? Like asking questions like about whether they're family friendly, and what counselors or advisors do you have who might be specifically um, they might be specifically charged with working with parenting students, or maybe they just are the better choice for working with parenting students, if you know what I mean. Like maybe there's just certain people that parenting students would want to avoid in some cases or whatever, right? I just think asking questions is really important. And of course, encouraging our young parents to just prioritize their needs and not to settle
Mhm.
for less than that. They have to advocate for themselves.
Right.
Advocate is my word of the year, by the way. I'm
Yes.
like, and I feel like I call myself an advocate for all. I believe that I advocate for young people, but I also advocate for the professionals to serve them. And I feel like that's a big piece of the puzzle that our young people are missing, is that ability to advocate for themselves. And so anytime we can teach them that skill and model it, it's crucial.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say for sure.
I love that you have a word, first of all, because we also have a word. We decided that our word for the year is intentional collectively. So we are
I
looking,
love it.
yes, how we can be intentional all year. So we just were talking about this recently, just about committing to a word is sometimes less stressful than committing to a thing or a certain big goal. Sometimes just everything else will kind of fall into line when you commit to a word. So that was really
Exactly.
and And a bunch of things that you all have been talking about really resonate, I think, with a lot of young parents. Even though everyone's story is different, there are a lot of similarities. Even though I wasn't a teen parent, my mom was, and she always tells stories that she moved to another school that had a daycare on site. And every day during her lunch break, she would come in and put me down for a nap. And that was a memory that she always remembered. That was a memory that I don't know that I remember, but I've seen pictures. So in my head, I remember. Um, but I think that setting out special moments like that is super important. If it wasn't for that school, would she be a doctor now and own her own practice and all the things? Because she had the
Question.
support, she
Yeah.
had the support, but then she
Mhm.
could also parent in the way that she wanted to parent. And so she didn't have to leave me behind, or she could walk across the hall and
Yeah.
spend time with me. And so I think that that also plays into our relationship now, and I'm so grateful that she took me along to college, and so it exposed me to college, and there was no choice. I was going to college whether I liked it or not. And then when
Yep.
I didn't even have to think twice when I had my daughter of whether or not I was going to finish college. It may take me a little longer, but you're going to finish because your mom did it and you did it along with her, and your daughter's going to walk the stage with you just like you walked the stage with your mom, and that's what we're going to do. And so I think that you're right, having a support, whether it be family, sometimes it's not family, and sometimes it's
Exactly. And most times it's not family for our kids, to
exactly.
be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I like that you all are shedding light on it doesn't have to be your mom or your dad or your partner or your partner's family. It could be your school. It could be programs in your community. It could be other people, your friends, whoever it is. Because I had friends rally around me who never had children. Some of them didn't even have siblings. And they were the first ones I told I was pregnant. How are they even supposed to know what to do or what to say? But
Yeah.
build your community. And so I think that's super important. Um, but I also, and we talk a lot about this on Yep. We talk a lot about stigma and barriers and finishing school and goals. But I want to go a little bit off topic. So I'm going to throw you a curveball because I like to do that. And I just want to know, in an ideal world, right? If you could just, in an ideal situation, an ideal organization that you could develop or whatever it is, and it can align with what you all are doing already, where you work. But what would those supports, what would that access, what would a day to day look like for a young parent or a teen parent in this organization?
So are we okay? Um, if if I ruled the world,
Yes. Yep. Yep. Exactly.
um, so in terms of if I've thought about this so much actually, like, but I'm thinking in terms of like if I could create my own little um I don't know, teen parent community, which is not what that's kind of not the idea because I want them to not ever feel separated from the rest of the group, like or rest of the people. But I do feel like, when it comes to young people's support, I feel like there would be flexibility. There would be the ability to schedule yourself around, you know, um, what you need for your children, for one. But the other thing that I want to mention, because, and I may or may not be answering your question directly, um, but I do feel like there's such a focus once a young person becomes a parent, there is so much focus on the baby, on the child, right?
Mhm.
That the young person almost becomes invisible.
Yeah.
Um, and I get emotional thinking about this, so I apologize. But I feel like in a perfect world, I feel like the young person would feel valued and feel like it's the goal is for their mental health, their well-being to be the focus so that they can be the best they can be for their own child. I think we do want to support the children. That's absolutely true. But I think the only way we can do that with sustainability being, the goal is to really nurture our young parents and make them feel that they are absolutely champions. You know what I mean? Like they have the ability to do all of these things and more. And I think, so if that means, having the celebrations and, making every goal they achieve, a proud moment, and making sure that we're celebrating them for everything they do that is, that is overcoming an obstacle. Um, you know, I often will tell my programs, I want you to do the celebrations. I want you to make sure your girls have prom dresses. I want you to make sure they get to go to prom. I want to get you to give them daycare if they need it, for childcare, for prom, whatever. They need to have all of the experiences that any other young girl should have, or any other young male should have. Um, I want them to be able to go do things with their friends. And so I think it's important to keep the social connections that they've had, or build new ones, if they're not healthy ones that they've had in the past. But so I think that it would be kind of a holistic approach to working with our young parents, and that means kind of building a community in which they are valued and feel empowered
Yeah.
as young women and young men. But then secondary to that is being a parent. And I know that sounds probably
No.
backwards in some people's minds, but to me, I think you can't really be an effective parent without nurturing yourself first.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question, but it might not.
It
No,
totally does. It totally does. You cannot parent from an empty cup. I love
yeah.
all of it.
Yeah.
At any stage in parenting, from the
No.
beginning, middle to end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that, because it's a nugget of wisdom, but also just like a reminder, even for me, 9 years into this, Brandy,
13 years into
13
it.
years into this,
Same
like,
for me.
you cannot pour from
Yeah.
an empty
I
cup.
mean,
It's so
you
true.
mentioned the end, right? The end of parenting. This is not, I won't say the end, that sounds, but I mean, my kids are both adults.
Yeah.
It's never over.
Um,
It's never
my baby boy that I walked around in college with on my chest in that little carrier is 27.
Yeah.
Like he's 7 years older than I was. Well, than I was when I had him. So that's insane to me. But it's really true. I still carry him, like I
Yeah.
can't, you never stop.
Yeah,
It never
it
stops.
never stops.
Yeah.
I know. I call my mom first for everything, every inconvenience, everything. Any,
And she
Yep.
better pick up the
and
phone.
she better pick up the phone. And if she
Of
doesn't,
course.
I'm looking her up on Life 360, and if she doesn't answer there, she's at the gym. I'm calling the gym. Like I've literally done this before. Where are
That's
you, and why aren't you
hilarious.
answering?
Yep. Oh,
Uh,
that's great.
I love it. And another thing, I think just in general, I want to circle back to when you talked about advocating, because we talked about this with another young parent before who's currently in college. And we talked about the fact that sometimes it's scary. I just finished my master's. So in graduate school, it's a little bit more flexible. But in undergrad, I remember being so scared to tell them, like, I'm going to miss class today because I don't have daycare or childcare. I cannot finish this paper right now. Like, we are going
Yeah.
through sleep regression and we are going through teething and I can't, right? And I was so scared to do that, so I just made it happen. And truthfully, my I was like on the honor roll or whatever, the
Dean's
president's
List.
award for the
Mhm.
first time when I became a parent. That was not the case before. And so, you just do it. But I want to add on to advocating is ask for what you need. If you need an extension, most of the time professors and teachers and all of that, they're open to do it. They're not going to publicize it to the whole class, but if you ask on a case by case basis, typically they will be flexible. And if they're not, that is a nugget that you need to keep in your
Yeah.
pocket. Don't register for their class again. Don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting that you said that, because to be honest, I think so we get so I say we. So I'm so far removed from high school, but my point is high schools, for example, we get used to that stringent, like, you have to have it done by this date or it's a zero, or you only get half credit if you turn it a day late. Like, there's so many things that are so set in stone, and you get,
Mhm.
and if you value education and you're worried about your grades, you are constantly stressed in high school, right? That's just the truth. If you don't value education and you don't really care and you just want to pass so you can graduate, chances are, number one, you may not be going to college anyway. But my point is, if you have those goals, when you become a parent, the stress is even higher
Yeah.
because you want to be more successful. You want to get better grades. You want to get, you want to do everything better.
Yeah.
At least that was my experience. And I remember feeling so stressed and wanting to do everything better, wanting to do everything more, wanting to be there more, and so it gives you this sense of like, you almost feel like you're failing if you don't show up to something, right? But you're right. The truth is, once you get to college, things are different, right? Like there is a little more flexibility. Your professors are a lot more willing to have a conversation with you.
Right.
They're a lot more willing to be flexible. There's a lot more you can do when you're not in class than there is when you're in high school. Like
Yeah.
you could be working on an assignment, for your college course at home when you're, not able to be there and you can still get it in on time. Like there's a lot of flexibility that I think a lot of young people don't realize
Yeah.
unless they ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
Mm-hmm.
Advocate.
Advocate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will also like never forget, kind of just to piggyback off of this conversation. I had like this one 8 a.m. class with this, and it was like one of the only professors in my major, so it was like mandatory. And 8 a.m. was one, not realistic for me. My daughter wasn't even catching the school bus yet at that time, but it still
Yeah.
wasn't going to be possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I would always come in at least like 8:10, 8:15. And it was like a psychology class. And like, I don't know what the topic was that we were learning, but she would like find the way to like make it about me when I'm like walking in late, like, oh, this is someone who
Oh,
doesn't care, or like something like that. And literally, my senior year, she had a baby. She had a baby and I needed her class to pass, and she was the most lenient and flexible with me. I honestly, if I didn't pass that class, I don't know what would have happened, but I thank her because I feel like she's the reason why I passed. So I feel like sometimes they don't get it and some people are unwilling to get it. But ooh, when the tables turn,
Right. And you
you
get
you
it.
see you can see the full picture, but she went out her way to, like, really be the best my senior year, and so I thank her for that. But it's just crazy how to not be in the situation and then to never maybe think it would be you, and then here you are. So it's just, like, always give grace to people, no matter their circumstance, who in
absolutely.
whatever
Well,
role you're in.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, nobody ever truly knows another person's story or another person's reasons for where they are in their life. And so, and truthfully, until somebody has experienced something on their own, they won't ever really. It's one thing to have empathy for people, right? And compassion and love. And there's a lot of people out there that have that without ever having the experience. But once you've experienced something, it certainly puts you in a much different position and gives you a much different view of what another person's going through. And so I'm glad that it turned out the way it did for you because obviously, one person can really shift their perspective once they have an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true.
Absolutely.
So true. Okay, so I have one more question for you, and it's also off
Okay.
the cuff. Sorry.
She always
Thanks for the list of questions, by the way. I'm just
she
kidding.
always does this.
Do this.
I'm okay. I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, so my question, because it just made me think. So, working with people, working with youth, working with people who are going through things, sometimes it can be really heavy. And I talk about this with our team sometimes too, because sometimes as mentors, like Divine can attest, they hear a lot of stories that are really troubling, right? You walk away with those stories, and you kind of talked about this as being a teacher. You carry the weight of your students and their stories and their life and the stigma they face and the barriers they face, and you just want so much for them. I also say that all of the babies are all my nieces and nephews, so I will fly to North Carolina. I will fly to Pennsylvania, wherever I need to talk to the teacher if I need to, because I just love them so much through the screen. And so, how have you been confronted, I guess, with this feeling of like, either it could be like vicarious trauma, or it could bring up past feelings of the way that you felt when you were navigating this, or even just carrying the weight of people's stories and wanting so much for them to succeed and to get out of their situation or to heal or whatever it is. And the second part of that question is, how do you prevent burnout in that? Because I think that this conversation, I mean, it's right, like this conversation is sometimes for young parents, but it's also for organizations or for people who are working with young parents. And it's important that we are true to what we're doing, but also that we don't take on too much, that we completely crash.
Yeah, so I'm going to just start this response with a caveat that I am not the best at doing the things I'm about to tell you. So, and I have dealt with this a lot over the past 20 some years. Um, I have I'm an empath to the core. I carry weight with me all the time and it's heavy. It causes physical reactions. I'm always anxious. So I'm just going to say this. Um, I love people. I love people to the core of my being, and I want everyone to be happy and healthy and loved. And so it's really hard for me to see when people are struggling, right? Like I'm emotional now, even thinking about the idea of anyone struggling, like it bothers me. So I think that's part of the reason for me being in this career that I'm in. And honestly, I don't even know that I would have been a teacher had I not had my first child when I did, right? Like, I don't know what I would have done. As you mentioned, like, none of us know what our course would be had we not had our children when we did, right? Like, but what I will say is that it is so incredibly important that we take care of ourselves. And I know that I'm speaking things right now that I need to be following, the advice that I need to follow myself. And I try to do that. I find outlets, right? Like we need creative outlets. We need to find ways of expressing ourselves. I do a lot of, I haven't recently, but I used to do a lot of writing. Um, Music is a huge escape for me. I like to read. I like to share things with others. But I will tell you that at the end of the day, I I just absolutely I feel like my advocating for others is a way for me to really kind of allow myself to let it out, right? Like I know that makes it sound a little silly, but so my role right now isn't as direct with youth as I'd like it to be. I always think that I'd like to work more closely with the youth, like I did when I was teaching, but with more of a mentorship or more of a working with them in a support or service kind of way. However, what I get to do, and I say that with pride, is that I get to be a part of this program that, you know, um, I ensure that our staff are the kind of people that are, have their hearts open to these young people, and I provide them with the kind of support they need to take care of themselves while also taking care of the youth that they are, charged to serve. And so, it's always on my mind. I worry. So I'm kind of like, it's like a double whammy for me because I'm concerned and worrying about the youth, and I'm concerned and worrying about the staff who serve them because they're carrying weight, and then I'm carrying their weight for them. And also, so it's, you kind of just pile it on, right? But at the end of the day, it's about reflection. It's about looking over what you're doing and thinking, where could I maybe lighten the load a little bit? Where can I put a little bit more onto other, maybe I can find a different person or a different organization to carry this or maybe handle that for me, or, whatever the case may be. So my goal is to make the lives of my staff who are doing this direct service work, which is absolutely the most admirable work I can think of, um, to create opportunities for them to do it more easily with a little more support, and obviously to make them feel as valued as possible as well throughout the process. So self-care for sure, but I'm
Yes.
going to leave this meeting and write down the things I need to do to help myself as
Yes.
well.
No, honestly, me and Brandy say that all the time. We're saying it out loud, so we'll be able to receive that
We all
all.
know it,
Yeah.
right? Like we know.
Yeah.
It's just but the people with servant hearts like ours,
Yeah.
we have a hard time taking time to do that. Like, it's just difficult.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Difficult. But we're going to be intentional this year, and we're going to advocate for
For
ourselves,
ourselves.
and we're going to be accountable to ourselves. And when this is released, we're going to watch it back and be like, ooh, have I been doing self-care this
Oh,
week?
that's right.
Ooh.
I was supposed to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
But
well,
before we wrap up, I wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe highlight anything that we missed about Elect that you'd like to cover, and maybe dissect a little bit about why it was developed and any like future goals that you are working on at the moment.
Yeah, I think so just to kind of wrap up a little bit based on all the things we've talked about today. I think we talked about advocate. We talked about supporting our young parents through it all, making sure they have somebody in their corner. And the value of um speaking up and looking for things and not settling, for anything, because they are in a position where the world is at their fingertips and they really could achieve so much more than they even dream they can at that point in their lives, right? But I think one of the things I'm very concerned about and want my programs to be constantly thinking about, and this is whether you're in Pennsylvania as a part of one of the Elect programs, or you're out of state and you're in some other parenting program, or you're within a school that you want to learn how to support our young parents. I think it's really important that we design effective programming, and the program that we have is truly understanding of what our young parents face. And by that, I mean, maybe they need to do some needs assessments. Maybe they need to look at some holistic approaches to this when we talk about academic, financial, and their emotional needs, right? And I think where a lot of these programs, like I mentioned before, get it wrong is we focus so much on the parenting aspect and the child getting what the child needs that we lose sight of what the young parent needs, because they are an individual. They are a developing young person who still has incredible potential, and we need to tap into that as much as possible. And truthfully, whether it's a school or an organization or whatever it might be, college, high school, just partnering with these childcare centers or nonprofits and other employers to try to give our young parents more opportunities, and expand those opportunities for them, because right now they're so limited.
yeah.
And honestly, just advocating for policy changes when it comes to what's acceptable and what's available to our young parents out there. Paid internships. I mean, come on, right? Like, give our kids opportunities that will allow them to still be a productive and successful parent, as well as an employee, or future employee. So, I think that's it. But truthfully, I just feel like there's so much more to do.
Yeah.
But we are really making progress. So I don't want to make it sound like we aren't doing things right in some ways. I believe our young parents are so much further ahead than they would have been, 10, 20 years ago even. But I do feel like there's more work to do. And I just challenge everybody to stand up and just, not settle, there's more for you to do out there.
Yes. Stand up. Get it done. Let's get it
Yes,
done.
There's always a better
absolutely.
opportunity and experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said, this felt like a warm hug. It truly did. It felt like, just
Absolutely.
kind of talking to like peers and workshopping through some things and seeing what's out there. Our goal is always to see what's out there, expose the general community to what's out there and challenge people to step up and
Absolutely.
create more things. So we really appreciate you. We hope this is not the last time that we have you on, or that we work together on whatever. But until next time, you all,
Absolutely. I'm here anytime you need me. Thank you so much, ladies.
thank
If you
you.
enjoyed the Up podcast, please subscribe, share, and leave a comment.
And visit youngunitedparents.org for the information, community, and resources young moms and dads need to thrive.